Are you ready to learn about the drama of the queen bee? Talking to people about the queen bee is one of my favorite things to do when I was giving a beekeeping tour. And that's because it's really easy to relate it to soap operas and TV shows and Game of Thrones and all of these fun things that people love to talk about and things that are in entertainment right now. So the queen bee usually lives 3 to 5 years. However, the oldest queen bee was 7 years old. And since mentioned in the last section, worker bees are only living 6 to 8 weeks, queen is outliving her daughters by quite a bit. The best way to look at the role of the queen bee is to say that she is essentially the reproductive part of the beehive. Although we call her the queen, she's not really the one in charge and giving orders. She's really the mother bee of the hive. She lays eggs all day long. She can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day, which is more than an egg a minute, assuming that once in a while she's stopping to get something to eat, maybe take a nap, and that's it. That's all she does. She just lays egg after egg after egg. Now, because she's so busy laying so many eggs, she has attendants that feed her and clean her and look after her. And talking about attendants feeding her, she gets her own special diet. We call this royal jelly. And only, well, all bees, when they're an egg, the first couple days of their life, they're an egg, they get royal jelly, but the queen gets royal jelly her entire life. Now, interestingly enough, royal jelly is something that only the worker bees produce. They secrete it from a gland in their head, and that's what they feed the queen bee and the eggs. Now, some people think that royal jelly is the fountain of youth because the queen is outliving her daughters by so much more. However, scientists say that when you break down royal jelly into its main components, there's really nothing all that special in it. Either way, the queen is a pretty amazing little creature. Most beehives only have one queen. There have been many times in the past where I've seen 2 queens in a hive, but most of the time it's all figured out after a few weeks and the hive goes back to having just one queen. Now, there's a reason why a hive only wants one queen, and that is because the queen in the hive is producing a pheromone. Each hive has its own unique pheromone, and it communicates with the bees the health of the hive. This pheromone keeps the worker bees from laying eggs, and it also makes the bees more productive. Hives that do not have an active, healthy queen producing a pheromone are often kind of lazy, for lack of a better word. And as a beekeeper, you start to get to know the sound of a hive with no queen. They kind of have this dull, bored, I guess is the best way to describe it, buzzing sound to them. They're not excited and active and full of energy. They kind of lost that unifying thing that makes them want to start their day. The queen is larger than the bees, the worker bees. She is about 50% larger. She's not gigantic, but she's kind of longer, and she's got hips, for lack of a better word, and this is because she's laying so many eggs a day, and that kind of plumps her up a little bit. When she first hatches, she's about the same size as the worker bees and much harder to spot, although still a little bit different in shape. She's also usually a different coloring. If your honeybees are yellow with black stripes, your queen will often be more of a caramel colored with either no stripes or just maybe a little bit of black striping at the very bottom. Queens vary in coloring as well as the different strains of honeybees, but what is good to know is that the queens are often darker and have different striping patterns. When a hive needs to make a queen, they will take eggs that a queen laid and they will feed it royal jelly throughout its egg and larva stage. Like I mentioned earlier, only eggs get fed royal jelly. But if they want this bee to turn into a queen instead of a worker bee, they just continue to feed it royal jelly throughout its larva stage. They also eat away at the wax around this cell and make this cell much larger, and the cell actually hangs upside down instead of horizontally like the rest of the worker bees. It's very easy to spot a fully developed queen cell within the beehive. The bees do not just make one new queen bee for their hive. They'll make a bunch. I've seen 8, 10, 12 queen cells in just one hive. Now what happens is that the first queen that hatches, she goes around and tries to find all the unhatched queens. And she has a stinger, although it is not barbed, and she will stab all of those unhatched queens in their cell. With the intention of killing them so that she can be the reigning queen. If 2 queens hatch at the same time, they'll eventually meet up at some point in the hive and they will battle it out with their stingers until one kills the other. And that's because a hive can only have one queen bee. That queen is releasing her pheromone and it's communicating with the hive something very important. If you have multiple queens releasing their pheromone, it's going to be chaos and it's not going to work well. So once that queen is the queen for the hive and she has gotten rid of all the other potential queens, after a couple of days she will go out on her mating flight. And when she's on her mating flight, she's flying by herself and she releases that pheromone, and that lets drones hanging out outside know that she's looking to mate, and they call it a comet's tail. It literally is just this cloud, a little cloud of male bees chasing behind this queen bees. So the queen is outside the hive. She'll mate with up to 30 drones. She comes back to her hive. Maybe even the next day she'll go out and mate again, and then that's it. She stores up all that sperm for the rest of her life, and she uses that sperm to lay fertilized eggs for the rest of her life. And sometimes she's laying unfertilized eggs for the males. But what's most important is that she's fertile so that she can lay fertilized eggs and produce a ton of females, and then she's laying up to 2,000 eggs a day. But after she's a year old, she's laying about half that, and next year she's going to be laying considerably less, until the point that she's not fertile anymore and she will be replaced. And how is the queen bee replaced? Well, interestingly enough, there is not one bee whose job it is to be the assassin and go get rid of mom. They collectively surround her. I've heard people refer to it as a cuddle ball, but they will surround her, they'll vibrate their flight muscles, and they will essentially cook her. So they cuddle her to death. And that's how they will get rid of their queen if she is not fertile enough, and replace her with a new queen. Once this queen bee has mated, she will never go mate again. She will use that sperm to lay fertilized eggs for the rest of her life. And if she ever does leave the hive again, the worker bees will follow her. Before, when she had not mated yet, the bees in the hive did not acknowledge her as their queen. It's not until she comes back and has mated that the worker bees say, okay, now you are our queen. And wherever you go, we go. And that's how bee beards come about. What you do is you take the queen out of a hive and put her in a cage, and the worker bees will smell her pheromones somewhere else, and they will all cluster around her wherever she is, which might be on your face, and that's how you make a bee beard, or wherever else you want them to go. So the queen bee never gets alone time ever again. She's actually also rubbed bald. You will notice that bees are fuzzy. The older bees get, the less fuzzy they are, but they're all born pretty fuzzy. The queen bee looks pretty bald, and that's because since she's releasing a pheromone and all the bees in the hive need to smell this pheromone, there will be bees that are constantly walking up to her and touching her with their antenna, and then they go walk around the hive, and that's how they distribute the pheromone all over the beehive. Try some queen spotting. Rewatch the video and pause it when a video of bees appears and try to find the queen. Then press play and wait for the blue arrow to show you where the queen is.